that. Yeah. So originally, God made Adam and Eve, and they had children. They had Cain, they had Abel, they had Seth. And people ask, where did Cain get his wife? You know, there's only the people on the planet. No, the Bible, you read Genesis 5, Adam had sons and daughters. So he had daughters as well. And now, so Cain's wife would have been either his sister, maybe a niece, but probably one of his sisters. And that bugs people because much later in Scripture, we read about, God doesn't say you can't marry a relative. He says you can't marry a close relative, okay, in terms of the biblical language, because we're all relatives. If you don't marry a relative, you didn't marry a human being, and then you're really in trouble. So now, today, we don't marry our close relatives because God instituted that around the time of Moses is when he instituted that law. Abraham was before that. Abraham married his half-sister. Sarah was Abraham's half-sister. Okay, so that law was not in place yet. Around the time of Moses, God said, okay, now you don't marry your close relatives. Why? You need to think poodle. Okay? The reason that purebreds have problems is because they're closely related. It's the result of inbreeding. And when you inbreed like that, the tendency of getting a mutation from dad and mom at the same site is much higher, and therefore you'll suffer a disease. You see, a lot of times if you get a mutation from the gene of one parent, you get a healthy gene from the other, you're fine. You don't, because most mutations are recessive. There are some exceptions. But if you married a close relative, it increases the probability that your children will suffer a debilitating effect due to mutations. Now, I think there's other reasons, too, that God put that institute in, but it wouldn't have been that way at the beginning, because Adam and Eve had 0 mutations when they were created. Their children had very few. Mutations have built up in the human genome over time, and so it wasn't until the time of Moses that they had been built up to the point where it would become a bit problematic for children who are descended from very, very close relatives. Okay, does that answer it?